Imagine a lake that hangs 300 feet above the ocean. From one angle, it looks like it's about to pour itself straight into the sea below it. It isn't an illusion someone built, it's just how the land folds here, like the earth itself is playing a trick on anyone who looks too closely. Now imagine driving toward that same coastline, and the road simply disappears into a mountain. You brace yourself for a tunnel. What you don't expect is that somewhere underneath there, beneath tons of black rock and freezing ocean water, there's a roundabout. Cars merging, lanes splitting, completely normal traffic quietly happening under the Atlantic. And less than an hour from that same tunnel, there's a village that, until the year 2004, could only be reached by a small boat, or by walking 2 hours over a mountain in freezing wind, because a road there had never existed. At one point, only a handful of people were left living in it. A handful. These three things exist within a single afternoon's drive of each other. On the same tiny cluster of islands, in the middle of the North Atlantic, between Iceland and Norway. On land, most people couldn't point to on a map if their life depended on it. This is the Faroe Islands, and living here is nothing like what the photos suggest. The strangest part isn't the waterfalls or the lake or the tunnels. It's that around 54,000 people live here on purpose, cut off from almost everything you'd call convenient, and most of them will tell you without hesitation that they have no plans to ever leave. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why, and you might even start questioning why you haven't left yet either. Today, we are going to walk through this piece of heaven. The wonders that make it look unreal, the weather that tries to break you, the food that will genuinely challenge you, and the honest, harder truths nobody puts in the postcard. Every stop on this trip is really answering the same question. Why do you choose isolation over convenience when the rest of the world is racing the other way? By the end, you'll understand exactly why people here choose it, and whether you actually would, too. Let's start where most people's Faroe Islands obsession begins, because odds are you've seen a photo of this place without knowing its name. Picture a village of maybe a dozen houses, wedged into a green valley, mountains rising on either side. At the far end, a river simply runs out of land and drops straight into the Atlantic. No lake at the bottom, no riverbed continuing, just open air and then sea. This is Mulafossa, and the village behind it is called Gassadalur. Here's the part that changes how you see it. For most of the last century, Gassadalur was one of the most cut-off places in the entire country. There was no road. To reach the next town, people walked over a mountain pass, roughly 2 hours each way, in wind strong enough to knock a grown adult sideways, through fog thick enough to erase the path in front of them completely. For decades, the only mail this village received came on the back of one man, a local postman who made that same brutal walk on foot in every season simply because there was no other way. When the weather turned, which in the Faroe Islands it does constantly, the village was simply unreachable. Not inconvenient, unreachable. Imagine living somewhere that the outside world can only reach when the sky allows it. By the early 2000s, only a handful of people were still living there. The village was close to disappearing entirely. Then, in 2004, a tunnel was finally cut through the mountain. A drive that used to take 2 hours on foot became a 5-minute trip by car. And something interesting happened. People didn't abandon Gassadalur once it was easy. They came back to it. Today, it's a living village again, with a small cafe, hiking trails, and, if you're lucky, puffins nesting on the surrounding cliffs in summer. Stand at the viewpoint above Mulafossa, and you understand instantly why this image ended up on travel posters worldwide. It's the kind of place where you stop trying to get the shot after 5 minutes and just stand there instead. Maybe that's the first clue to why people stay here. When the outside world finally made it easy to leave, they used the new road to come home instead. A short drive from Gassadalur, there's a lake called Survagsvatn, the largest in the country. From the ground, it looks ordinary, but hike up to the right ridge and the ground drops away in a way that rearranges what your brain thinks it's looking at. The lake appears to float hundreds of feet above the ocean, like it's about to pour itself into the sea below. It's an optical illusion, nothing more. But knowing that doesn't make it any less disorienting. At the far end of the cliff walk, the lake actually does empty into the ocean through a waterfall called Bostalafossur. Locals call the round trip one of the easier hikes on the islands, and also one people underestimate, because easy here still means walking a cliff edge in wind that can push you off balance, in weather that can shift from clear to zero visibility in the time it takes to eat a sandwich. That's not an exaggeration, that's just Tuesday here. And maybe that's the second clue. People who live with a hike like that as Tuesday build a very different relationship with risk and with each other than most of us ever have to. Off the northern coast, 2 sea stacks rise straight out of the ocean, apart from the cliffs behind them. Locals call them Risin and Kellingin, the giant and the witch. The story goes that these two tried to drag the entire Faroe Islands across the sea to Iceland in the night, so taken by its beauty, they wanted to keep it for themselves. But dawn caught them before they finished, and they froze solid where they stood. Further south, near a cluster of uninhabited islets, 2 sea stacks called Drangarnir rise beside a tiny islet named Tindhólmur, its 5 jagged peaks lined up like broken teeth. You can only really see it by boat, gliding between cliffs on water so still it barely looks real. It says something that a place this beautiful still needed a myth to explain why nobody should try to take it away. If you want to feel small in a good way, there's one place built for exactly that. North of the main cluster, a long, narrow island called Kalsoy, the Flute, strung with tunnels drilled end to end. A car ferry from Klaksvik, 20 minutes across dark water, then a narrowing road until it simply stops at a tiny settlement called Trollanes. From there, an hour on foot, uphill, along a ridge with a drop on either side, to a lighthouse called Kallur. sitting right where the land runs out. Locals don't call this a nice view. They call it "the earth actually ends here" experience. And maybe that's exactly why people keep making that walk. In a world of endless notifications and no real edges left to find, this is one of the last places that still has one. There's a statue on this island worth knowing before you go. In the village of Mikladalur, at the water's edge, stands a bronze figure of a woman rising out of a seal skin. She's called Kopakonan, the Seal Woman. The old story goes that seals were once humans of the sea who could shed their skins one night a year to dance on land. A local fisherman fell for one who lingered too long, stole her skin so she couldn't return, and forced her to stay and become his wife. Years later, when she finally found her skin again, she went back to the sea, but not before promising the village a heavy price for what had been taken from her. It tells you something true about this place. Nature here has never been just scenery. It's always had teeth, and the people have always respected that. Maybe that respect, more than the scenery, is the real reason they've stayed put for 1,000 years. Locals joke that they have 37 different words to describe fog. Whether the number is exactly right doesn't matter. What matters is that a culture only builds that much vocabulary around something it deals with constantly. The weather here doesn't have seasons so much as moods, and they change fast. Locals have a saying, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It sounds like a brochure line until you live through it, and then it just sounds like a warning. Thanks to a warm ocean current, winters aren't as brutal as the latitude suggests, and summers stay cool and green. In summer, the sun barely sets. In winter, daylight shrinks to a few pale hours, and the rest is darkness, wind, and the glow of windows on the hillsides. Through all of it, sheep have quietly taken over. The name of the islands is believed to come from an old word for sheep islands, and sheep genuinely outnumber people here, wandering onto roads and, more than occasionally, standing directly on top of turf-roofed houses, grazing like it's just another hillside. Nobody honks. You just stop, wait, and let them finish crossing in their own time. It's one of the smaller ways this place teaches you to slow down, whether you meant to or not, and maybe one worth borrowing. Puffins tell a similar story in the air. Every summer, tens of thousands gather along the sea cliffs, especially on the remote island of Mykines. Stand still long enough, and one might land within arm's reach, unbothered, because out here, you're the visitor in their world, not the other way around. Here's a detail almost nobody outside the islands knows, and it might say more about the local mindset than anything else on this list. For years, the Faroe Islands didn't exist on Google Street View. So a local woman named Durita Dahl Andresen fixed that herself. She strapped small, solar-powered, 360-degree cameras onto the backs of a handful of sheep, let them graze across the hills as they always do, and use the footage to start mapping the country by hand. She called it Sheep View 360. The story spread internationally, and eventually Google itself sent a mapping team to finish the job. Faced with being left off the map entirely, this place didn't wait for permission or outside help. It looked at the animals already outnumbering its own population and turned them into the solution. That's the pattern behind almost everything here. Solve it yourself with what you actually have. You'd expect an economy this small, on land this harsh, to be fragile. It isn't. There's no large-scale industry here beyond the ocean that surrounds it. Fishing and salmon farming are the foundation of how the country supports itself. And an unusually large share of the process stays under local control, rather than being handed off to outside companies. That control means a country of roughly 54,000 people can post an average income higher than mainland Denmark's, keep unemployment near record lows, and still fund modern hospitals, schools, and an entire tunnel network, almost entirely off the back of the sea. There's an obvious risk in leaning this heavily on one industry, and locals know it. But it's a trade they've made deliberately. Less variety in exchange for something simple, stable, and difficult to break. It raises a fair question for the rest of us. How much of our own variety is actually security, and how much is just noise? Food here isn't really about flavor. It's about survival that turned into tradition, and then into pride. Crops never really worked on these wind-swept, salt-sprayed islands, so the Faroese built their food culture around fish, seabirds, and sheep. To make food last through the long, dark winters without refrigeration, they developed rast, a slow fermentation where meat or fish hangs to cure in small, wind-through sheds by the coast for months. The best-known version is fermented lamb, sharp and strong, and unlike anything most visitors have tried. Locals will tell you the first bite is a shock, and by the third, you start to understand it. It's still a normal part of family meals today, served next to dried fish, boiled potatoes, and homemade bread. It's a strange kind of hospitality, being handed something intense and unfamiliar in a home that otherwise feels exactly like anyone's grandmother's kitchen. Maybe that's the real lesson in it. Tradition here was never about comfort. It was about not needing anyone else to survive the winter. Here's where the modern side of this place stops being subtle. For a long time, life here depended on boats, on the sky clearing, on waiting. Not anymore. Over the last few decades, the country has built more than 20 tunnels through its mountains, including a small number cut directly beneath the ocean floor. Driving into one for the first time plays a strange trick on your head. You brace for something dramatic and instead get smooth pavement and normal traffic, while an entire ocean presses down somewhere above the roof of your car. One of these tunnels even has a roundabout built inside it, purely because it was the most efficient way to keep traffic moving underwater. What's remarkable is the scale of the population doing this. This entire network, plus an airport, ferries, and a helicopter service, exists to serve a population smaller than a single neighborhood in a major city. There are fewer than 10 traffic lights in the whole country. It's a strange kind of paradox, isolated from the rest of the world, but barely isolated from itself. It's almost as if, once they decided staying was worth it, no amount of rock or ocean was allowed to be a real excuse. Ask a local here about crime, and you'll usually get a small laugh before they answer. Serious crime is almost non-existent. For long stretches spanning decades, the entire country recorded only a single murder. The one prison here holds a small number of inmates, mostly for minor offenses, and anyone convicted of something more serious is transferred off the islands entirely, since there's no facility built for it. Doors go unlocked. Kids walk to school without a second thought. At times, the country's prime minister has had a publicly listed phone number. A lot of that safety seems to come from something simpler than laws. Everybody genuinely needs everybody else here. There's a tradition called Heimablíðni, home hospitality, where local families open up their actual homes to strangers, cook a full traditional meal, and just talk. No restaurant, no staged experience, just a kitchen table and conversation that runs long because nobody's in a hurry to end it. It's the kind of trust that sounds naive from the outside, until you realize it isn't naivety at all. It's just what happens when a community has spent generations depending on each other to survive the same wind, the same isolation, and the same unpredictable sea. Worth asking, how much of our own distrust of strangers only exists because we've never actually had to need them? Now, here's the part most travel videos skip, and it matters because this place isn't a fantasy, it's a real country with real trade-offs. Life here is genuinely expensive. Almost everything beyond fish and lamb has to be shipped or flown in, and that cost gets passed straight to residents. Wages tend to be strong to match it, but the cost of living is something every resident has factored into their life. The isolation cuts both ways too. Weather can still ground flights and cancel ferries with little warning. And during the darkest, stormiest stretches of winter, that remoteness stops being charming and starts being genuinely difficult, especially for anyone dealing with it alone. Language is a real barrier. Faroese is the heart of the culture, and while most people also speak Danish and English, truly integrating the paperwork, the community events, the small talk in the village shop, usually means learning Faroese itself, a small language for a small number of people, and for newcomers, a genuinely steep climb. And the community, for all its warmth, is not especially diverse. This is a tight, close-knit culture that has spent centuries protecting its own identity, its own language, its own flag, specifically because it's so small and so exposed to being absorbed by somewhere bigger. That same protectiveness that makes the culture feel so strong can also make it a slower, harder place to fully break into as an outsider. None of this cancels out everything else you've just seen. It just means the picture is a real one, not a filtered one. A tiny country holding on to something rare at a real cost, on purpose. And maybe that's the honest answer to why people stay. Not because it's easy, but because they decided the cost was worth paying. Before we get to why people actually stay, it's worth seeing where most of them live, because it isn't what you'd picture for a national capital. Tórshavn is the biggest town in the country, small enough to walk across in 20 minutes. Centuries-old, black-tarred wooden buildings with turf roofs sit a few streets from sleek glass offices and Scandinavian apartment blocks. And somehow it works, like the town refused to choose between its past and its present. There's no rush hour here in any real sense. People walk to get coffee. People know their neighbors by name. And yet, this same small town runs a functioning government, a university, hospitals, and a media system. Everything a country needs, just scaled down to fit a population smaller than a single big city apartment complex. It's the whole country in miniature, unmistakably modern, unmistakably small, and completely unbothered by the contradiction, which might be the most Faroese trait of all. So here's the real answer to the question this whole video's been circling. It's not the waterfalls. It's not the lighthouse at the edge of the world, or the lake that plays tricks on your eyes, or the roundabout sitting under the ocean. Those are what get you to click. They're not what makes someone stay for a lifetime. What keeps people here is smaller than that, and somehow bigger. It's a community that still trusts each other enough to leave the door unlocked. It's a culture that fought by hand to make sure its own language wouldn't quietly disappear. It's a way of living that never tried to conquer the wind and the rain and the isolation, just learned generation after generation how to live inside it instead. 54,000 people on 18 islands in the middle of an ocean that could cut them off from everything at any moment. And they wouldn't trade it. Would you?